kind of man brings a convict into a neighborhood full of children?
She was 19, Brenda. She made a mistake.
A mistake? She hurt someone so bad they couldn't walk for a year. And the girl in the wheelchair? What, she gonna limp through life on your dime? What, the girl who can't speak? She's damaged beyond repair.
Are you done?
Your clients are done with you. Pastor Evans won't say your name on Sunday. This whole town wants you gone.
Then don't say my name. I don't need permission to open my own door.
Single, black, a carpenter who couldn't fix his own truck. The whole town of Carver, Mississippi turned its back on him. But no one, not even Gerald himself, could have predicted the day those three girls would come back and silence every last voice that ever laughed at them. Gerald Owens had never been the kind of man who asked for attention. He built things. That was what he did. Tables, chairs, bookshelves, cabinets, whatever people needed, Gerald made it with his hands and kept his mouth shut. He'd lived in Carver, Mississippi for 22 years. Moved there with his wife Helen back when the town still had a cotton gin running on the east side. She'd loved the quiet. She'd loved the porch. She'd said it was the kind of place where a family could breathe. Helen died of pancreatic cancer 5 years before this story begins. 41 years old, gone in 7 weeks. Gerald held her hand in a hospital room that smelled like floor cleaner and wilting flowers, and when it was over, he drove home, sat in his workshop, and didn't come out for 3 days. After that, he just worked. Sunrise to dark. Orders came in, furniture went out. He ate alone, slept alone, went to church alone. The pew he sat in every Sunday was the same one he'd shared with Helen, and nobody ever sat next to him. Not because they disliked him, because they didn't think about him at all. That was Gerald's place in Carver. Useful, quiet, forgettable. The town itself was small. 2,000 people, 1 traffic light, a post office that closed at noon on Wednesdays. Most folks were white. Most folks had been there for generations. Gerald was one of maybe 6 black families in the whole county and the only one inside town limits. People were polite to him. They waved. They bought his furniture. They said good morning at the hardware store. But polite isn't the same as welcome. Gerald knew the difference. He'd known it his whole life. Brenda Caldwell was the woman who ran Carver without holding the title. Councilwoman, yes. Church elder, yes. But more than that, she was the voice. If Brenda approved, it happened. If Brenda disapproved, it didn't. She organized the 4th of July parade, the school fundraiser, the Christmas potluck. She decided which families got casseroles when someone died and which ones got nothing. She'd brought Gerald a casserole when Helen passed. 1 dish. Tuna. She never came back. Gerald didn't have enemies in Carver. He didn't have allies either. He had customers. And that was enough. Until the morning he drove 40 miles to the county foster care office and told a social worker named Patricia Simmons that he wanted to take in 3 young women who'd aged out of the system with nowhere to go. Patricia had looked at him over her glasses. Mr. Owens, you understand what you're asking. These 3, they've been through every placement in the state. Nobody wants them. Not individually, and certainly not together. I understand. You're single. You're 50. You live in a town that, forgive me, doesn't exactly roll out the welcome mat for people who look different. I know what my town is. Then why? Gerald looked through the glass partition at the waiting room. 3 young women sat in plastic chairs. 1 stared at the floor. 1 stared at the wall. 1 stared at him, hard, angry, daring him to try. Because somebody should, he said. Patricia took off her glasses and rubbed her eyes. She'd been doing this job for 19 years. She'd heard every version of that answer. Most of them didn't last 6 months. But something in Gerald's voice, the way he said it without smiling, without performing, made her pull the paperwork from the bottom drawer instead of the polite rejection letter from the top one. I hope you know what you're getting into, she said. Gerald signed every page. He didn't. The county foster care office sat in a converted strip mall between a closed-down nail salon and a check-cashing place with bars on the windows. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The carpet smelled like coffee that had been reheated too many times. Patricia Simmons led Gerald down a hallway lined with filing cabinets. Each drawer was labeled by year. Some had stickers on them, smiley faces, stars, left over from when someone tried to make the place feel less like what it was. "I'm going to be straight with you," Patricia said, not slowing down. "I've placed over 400 kids in my career. These three are the ones that keep me up at night." She stopped at a door and looked at him. Naomi Cole, 21, born with a shortened tendon in her right leg. She's been through 14 foster homes since she was 6. 14! Every single one sent her back. Some said she was too slow, some said she was too quiet. One family told me, and I'm quoting, "We didn't sign up for a defective kid." Gerald said nothing. She taught herself to read law textbooks from a public library when she was 16. Not because anyone told her to, because she wanted to understand why the system kept moving her around like furniture. Patricia opened the door halfway. "She's the one sitting by the window. Hasn't looked up since she got here." Gerald saw her, thin, still, hands folded in her lap like she was waiting for something she'd already decided wouldn't come. Tessa Bryant, 20. Grew up in a home where her stepfather used her as a punching bag until she was 15. One night she snapped and went after him with a kitchen knife. He lived. She got 2 years in juvenile detention. When she came out, nobody would take her. Not one family. The file says violent tendencies. I say she survived. Patricia's voice tightened. "She's the one standing by the door, arms crossed. She's been watching you since you walked in. She does that with everyone. Sizes them up, decides how fast she needs to run." Gerald looked through the gap. Tessa was lean, coiled, eyes tracking him like a dog that had been kicked too many times to trust a hand. "And then there's Lily Watts." Patricia paused. She closed her eyes for half a second, the way people do when they're deciding how much truth someone can handle. Lily is 19. When she was 9 years old, she watched her mother get beaten to death by her mother's boyfriend, in the kitchen, while Lily hid behind the refrigerator. The hallway felt smaller. She hasn't spoken a word since. Not one. 10 years of silence. Doctors say there's nothing physically wrong with her vocal cords. She just stopped. Every therapist, every specialist, every foster parent who tried to get her to talk eventually gave up. She communicates through drawings, small ones, on napkins, on the backs of envelopes, on anything she can find. What does she draw? Patricia looked surprised. Most people asked what was wrong with her. Nobody ever asked what she made. "Houses," Patricia said quietly. "She draws houses. Every single one of them has a door that's open." Gerald felt something shift in his chest. Not pity, something harder to name. "Here's what I need you to understand, Mr. Owens. These three have 47 rejection letters between them. Combined. 47 families looked at their files and said no. Some said it on the phone. Some said it to their faces. One couple drove all the way here, sat in that waiting room for 20 minutes and left without saying a word." She held up a thick manila folder. "This is their future if you walk away. Group housing, minimum wage jobs if they're lucky, streets if they're not. The system doesn't follow up after 21. They age out and they disappear. That's math." Gerald looked through the door one more time. Naomi by the window, Tessa by the wall. Lily in the corner drawing something on the back of a receipt with a pencil that was almost too short to hold. 3 women the whole state had written off. Patricia watched Gerald carefully. She'd seen this look before. The rescue look. Usually from couples who wanted a feel-good story. Usually from people who lasted about 3 months before they started calling her office, asking how to send the kids back. "Mr. Owens, I need you to understand something. These 3 aren't children. They're adults. They have trauma that will wake you up at 3 in the morning. They have habits that come from surviving things you and I can't imagine. Naomi will try to make herself invisible. Tessa will try to make you give up. And Lily will make you wonder if you're making any difference at all." Gerald listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't reassure her. He just listened, the way a man listens when he already knows his answer and is waiting for the question to finish. He took the folder from Patricia's hand. "When can they move in?" Patricia stared at him. Then she reached for the filing cabinet behind her and pulled out 3 sets of paperwork she hadn't touched in months. How about Thursday? Thursday came. Gerald picked them up in his truck, the one with the rusted tailgate and the passenger door that didn't lock. Naomi sat in the front. Tessa and Lily sat in the back with their bags between them. Nobody spoke for the entire 40-mile drive. When they pulled onto Maple Street, Mrs. Hargrove was standing in her yard with a garden hose. She watched the truck park. She watched 3 young women step out. She turned off the water and went inside. By Friday, the phone calls started.
Gerald, what in God's name are you thinking?
That was Dale Perkins, who'd ordered a dining table 2 weeks ago. I've got kids on this street. I'm not comfortable with, you know. Gerald knew. Dale canceled the table. By Saturday, the canceled orders had stacked up. The Myers backed out of a custom bookshelf. The Fosters called about their kitchen cabinets, said they'd found someone else, didn't say who. Tom Bridwell, who'd been Gerald's most loyal customer for 8 years, left a voicemail that was 1 sentence long. Sorry, Gerald, can't be associated. By Sunday, Gerald walked into the Baptist church on 2nd Avenue the way he had every Sunday for 2 decades. Same shoes, same Bible, same pew, 3rd row from the back. Pastor Evans was mid-sermon when Gerald sat down. He didn't pause, didn't acknowledge him, but the sermon shifted. Something about discernment and knowing which battles belong to the Lord and which ones belong to foolishness. Gerald sat through the whole thing. When it was over, not one person shook his hand. Not one person said good morning. Deacon Harris, who Gerald had built a cradle for when his grandson was born, looked right through him on the way out. Gerald drove home in silence. Monday brought Brenda Caldwell's petition. 43 signatures. Typed up neat, printed on town council letterhead. The subject line read, "Concerns regarding unsuitable residential arrangements on Maple Street." She'd gone door to door over the weekend. 43 families had signed. In a town of 2,000, that was every household within 6 blocks. The petition didn't mention race. It didn't have to. It talked about safety concerns and community standards and the well-being of our children. Every word was clean. Every word was calculated. Gerald found a copy taped to his workshop door on Tuesday morning. That same day, someone spray-painted the side of his workshop. Red letters, 3 feet tall. The words were ugly. The kind of words that don't wash off with soap. The kind that stay in your chest long after the paint comes off the wood. Gerald stood in front of the wall for a long time. Then he went inside, mixed a batch of primer, and painted over it before the girls woke up. He never told them what it said. Wednesday night, a rock came through the kitchen window while they were eating dinner. It landed in the middle of the table, between the mashed potatoes and a plate of cornbread Gerald had made from Helen's recipe. Glass everywhere. Naomi froze. Lily dove under the table. Tessa was on her feet in half a second, fists clenched, moving toward the door. "Sit down," Gerald said. Not loud, not angry, just steady. Tessa stopped. She looked at him. Her whole body was shaking. "Sit down, Tessa." She sat. Gerald picked the rock off the table. There was a rubber band around it holding a piece of paper. He unfolded it, read it, folded it back up and put it in his pocket. "Cornbread's getting cold," he said. They ate in silence. Glass still on the floor, wind coming through the broken window. Gerald chewed slowly, like nothing had happened, like this was any other Wednesday. After dinner, he swept up the glass. He taped a piece of cardboard over the window. He checked the locks on every door twice. Then he sat on the porch in the dark, alone, and stared at the street for a long time. He didn't call the police. He didn't call anyone. There was no one to call. The police chief had signed Brenda's petition, name number 7. Inside, the lights in the girls' rooms went off one by one. First Naomi, then Lily, then Tessa, who always stayed up the latest, always listening, always watching. Gerald sat until midnight. The street was empty, the houses dark. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice and stopped. He thought about calling someone. His brother in Memphis, his cousin in Shreveport, anyone. But what would he say? That he was sitting on a porch in the dark because the town he'd lived in for 22 years had decided he was the enemy? That the only thing standing between his girls and the street was a man who couldn't afford to replace a kitchen window? He didn't call anyone. There was nothing to say that the silence didn't already cover. Then he went to his workshop, turned on the lamp, and started sanding a piece of oak he had no order for. He just needed to build something. The first month was war. Not the kind anyone could see from the outside. The kind that happens behind closed doors, between people who don't know how to live together and aren't sure they want to try. Tessa was the loudest problem. She slammed doors. She broke a glass on the second night. Not by accident, by throwing it at the kitchen wall after Gerald asked her to help with dishes. She stood there, chest heaving, waiting for him to hit her, waiting for the thing that always came next. Gerald picked up the pieces, set a new glass on the counter, said, "There's a broom in the closet if you want to help." Tessa didn't touch the broom. She went to her room and didn't come out until morning. 2 weeks in, she got into it with the neighbor's son, a 24-year-old named Craig Hargrove, who'd made the mistake of saying something about Gerald's charity cases, loud enough for Tessa to hear through the fence. She was over that fence in 3 seconds. Craig ended up on the ground with a bloody lip before Gerald could pull her off. The police came. Officer Daniels, name number 12 on Brenda's petition, took his time writing up the report. Looked at Tessa like she'd proven every word on that petition right. "You want to press charges?" he asked Craig. Craig touched his lip, looked at Tessa, looked at Gerald. "Nah," he said. "She hits like a girl anyway." Tessa lunged. Gerald caught her around the waist and held on until the squad car pulled away. That night, he sat on the edge of her bed. She was facing the wall. "You can't do that," he said. "He deserved it." "Maybe, but the next time you swing, they won't ask, Craig. They'll just take you." Silence. "I'm not going back," Tessa said. Her voice cracked on the last word. "I know," Gerald said. "That's why you've got to be smarter than them." Naomi was a different kind of hard. She didn't break things. She disappeared into them. She was up before dawn every morning, limping to the kitchen, making coffee Gerald didn't ask for. She cleaned without being told. She folded laundry that wasn't hers. She moved through the house like someone who had learned that the quieter you are, the longer they let you stay. Gerald watched her carry a basket of clothes up the stairs. One hand on the railing, bad leg dragging on every step, face tight with effort but not a sound coming out. "Naomi." She stopped, didn't turn around, just waited. "You don't have to earn this." She stood there for a long time, then she kept climbing. And then there was Lily. Lily didn't slam doors. Lily didn't clean. Lily sat in the corner of the kitchen on a stool Gerald had made years ago for Helen, and she drew. Napkins, paper bags, the margins of old newspapers. Anything flat and holdable became a canvas. She didn't look at Gerald. She didn't look at Tessa or Naomi. She existed in a space just beside the world, close enough to touch but unreachable. Gerald tried once. He set a plate of eggs in front of her one morning and said, "Good morning, Lily." Nothing. He said it the next morning, and the next, and every morning after that. "Good morning, Lily. Good morning, Lily. Good morning, Lily." 43 mornings in a row without a single response. On the 44th morning, Lily picked up her pencil and drew something on the napkin next to her plate. She slid it across the table without looking up. It was sunny, small, simple, rising over a flat horizon. Gerald looked at it for a long time. Then he pinned it to the refrigerator with a magnet. That was the closest thing to a conversation they'd had. At night, Gerald sat in his workshop, too tired to sand, too tired to build, too tired to do anything but sit. His back ached. His hands were cracked. The electric bill was 3 months overdue, and the only client he had left was an old woman in Greenville who wanted a jewelry box by Christmas. He built it by hand. Walnut. Dovetail joints. He delivered it himself because he couldn't afford to ship it. She paid him $60 and a jar of peach preserves. It kept the lights on for 1 more week. Some nights, Gerald sat in the dark and wondered if Patricia was right, if he was in over his head, if the town was right, not about the girls being broken, but about him not being enough. Then he'd hear Tessa close her door without slamming it, or see Naomi's light on past midnight studying, or find a new drawing pinned to the refrigerator, Lily's quiet proof that someone in this house was paying attention. And he'd think, not enough is still more than nothing. More than nothing is what they had before. He'd go to bed, Wake up at 5, make coffee, say good morning to Lily. Day 45, day 46, day 47. He kept going. It started with the workshop. Gerald was cutting boards for a porch railing one Saturday morning. A small job from a woman 2 towns over. Tessa was sitting on the back steps, watching. "You're holding the plane wrong," she said. "Excuse me?" "The angle. You're fighting the grain." He handed her the plane. She adjusted the blade, set it against the oak, and pulled. One clean stroke. The curl of wood came off thin and even like ribbon. "Where'd you learn that?" "Detention. Shop class was the only one they let us take." He pulled a second stool up to the workbench. From that day on, Tessa was in the workshop every afternoon. She didn't talk much while she worked, but her hands talked. Precise, patient. The anger that made her throw glasses and jump fences disappeared when she held a chisel. Gerald had been building for 25 years. Tessa, in 3 months, was already better at joints than he was. He started letting her finish pieces on her own. Naomi's shift was quieter. Gerald noticed the books, thick, dense, stacked on her nightstand and growing taller every week. Law books, case studies, constitutional history. One evening he found her at the kitchen table, highlighter in hand, reading a decision about parental rights in foster placements. "You ever think about going to school for this?" Naomi looked at him like he'd asked if she'd considered flying. "I have a record, Gerald. 9th grade education and a bad leg. People like me don't go to law school. People like you don't get told that here." She didn't respond, but her hand shook, just slightly, before she turned the page. 2 weeks later, he drove her to community college in Greenville. She took the GED practice test, scored in the 97th percentile. Neither of them mentioned it at dinner, but Naomi sat a little straighter that night. Lily was the slowest change. Still no words, still drawing on whatever she could find. But the drawings were shifting. Early on, they'd been small, tight, houses with closed windows, rooms with no doors, people drawn as outlines, hollow, faceless. Now the houses had porches. The windows were open. The people had hands holding things, cups, books, tools. One afternoon, Gerald found a drawing taped to the refrigerator next to the son she'd drawn weeks earlier. His workshop. Every detail exact. The workbench, the hanging tools, the lamp in the corner, and 2 figures inside, Gerald and Tessa. Lily had drawn them from memory, watching through the kitchen window. He drove to the hardware store in Greenville and bought her a proper sketchbook and a set of architect's pencils. Set them on the table without a word. Next morning, the stool in the corner was empty. Lily was sitting at the table, sketchbook open. She was drawing Gerald's house, but different. Bigger, extra rooms, a ramp by the front door, windows everywhere. She was redesigning it. Gerald poured her coffee. She didn't look up. But when he set the mug down, her pencil paused, just for a second, before she kept going. That night, for the first time, laughter came from upstairs. Tessa had said something to Naomi. Gerald couldn't hear what, but Lily was there too. He could tell because the laughter came in 2s, and then, barely, in 3s. He sat in the kitchen and listened. That was enough. Brenda Caldwell didn't give up. She changed tactics. 6 months in, a white envelope arrived. County letterhead, official seal, the kind that makes your stomach drop before you open it. Following a formal complaint, the County Department of Social Services would conduct an unannounced home inspection within 14 business days. Gerald read it twice, set it down, poured a glass of water and drank it slowly. He knew who filed it. Brenda had gone over the town council this time, straight to the county. A 4-page letter describing overcrowded conditions, unsupervised adults with criminal histories, and a single male guardian with no credentials providing care to 3 vulnerable young women. Every word designed to trigger an investigation. Every word technically true enough to stick. Gerald didn't sleep that night. He lay staring at the ceiling, running through everything in his house that could be questioned. The cracked bathroom tile, the window still patched with cardboard from the rock. Tessa's room didn't have a proper door, just a curtain because the original had come off its hinges 2 months ago and he hadn't had money to replace it. He got up at 4 in the morning and built a door. Oak, simple frame, hung it himself before sunrise. The inspector came on a Thursday. A woman named Sandra Voss, mid-50s, clipboard, reading glasses on a chain. She walked through every room without small talk, opened every closet, checked the refrigerator, the smoke detectors, the water heater, wrote something down after each stop. Tessa watched from the hallway, arms crossed, jaw tight, knuckles turning white. "Don't," Gerald whispered. "She's in our house, Gerald." "I know. Let her do her job." Sandra asked Gerald to sit at the kitchen table. She pulled out the complaint and read sections aloud. Overcrowded, unsafe, unqualified. "Mr. Owens, do you have any formal training in social work, counseling, or caregiving?" "No, ma'am." "Any certifications?" "I'm a carpenter." Sandra wrote something down. Tessa stepped forward. Gerald held up one hand, not even looking at her, and she stopped. Then Naomi spoke. She'd been sitting at the far end of the table the entire time, quiet as stone. Now she opened a notebook, the one she carried everywhere, filled with highlighted passages and handwritten notes, and started talking. "Ms. Voss, under Mississippi Code Section 43-15-13, a home inspection triggered by a third-party complaint requires the complainant to demonstrate material evidence of neglect or endangerment. The letter you're reading contains characterizations, not evidence. Overcrowded is subjective. This house has 3 bedrooms for 4 residents, which exceeds the state minimum of 50 square feet per person. Criminal history refers to a sealed juvenile record completed upon sentence. And no formal credentials is not a legal requirement for guardianship of adults over 18. Sandra stopped writing. She looked at Naomi over her glasses. "You're not a lawyer." "No, ma'am, not yet." Sandra looked at the notebook, at the highlighted codes, at the margins filled with cross-references in small, precise handwriting. She closed her clipboard, looked around the kitchen, clean counters, stacked dishes, drawings taped to the refrigerator, the smell of coffee Gerald had made fresh that morning. She looked at Gerald, then at Tessa, still coiled in the hallway, then at Naomi, sitting with her notebook open like a shield. "I'll be filing my report tomorrow," she said. "I don't anticipate a follow-up visit." She left. Gerald exhaled for what felt like the first time in 2 weeks. That evening, Brenda Caldwell received a 1-paragraph letter from the county. Complaint dismissed. No grounds for action. Case closed. Gerald heard later that she threw it in the trash and told her husband the system was broken. But that wasn't the part Gerald remembered about that day. After dinner, he was washing dishes. The house was quiet. Then he heard it. Paper sliding across the table behind him. He turned around. Lily was standing there. Not sitting, standing. She'd placed a drawing in front of his plate. Gerald's house. But this time, 4 figures stood by the door. Not outlines, faces, clothes. Gerald in his work boots. Tessa with sawdust on her arms. Naomi holding a book. And Lily herself, drawn for the first time ever, standing beside them. Underneath, in small, careful letters, the first word Lily had written in 10 years. Home. Gerald put down the dish towel. He sat at the table. He looked at that drawing until his vision blurred. He didn't wipe his eyes, he just let it happen. 3 years changed everything and nothing. The house was the same. The porch still sagged on the left side. The workshop still smelled like sawdust and linseed oil. Gerald still woke at 5, still made coffee in the same dented percolator Helen had bought at a yard sale in 1987. But the house was full now, full in a way it hadn't been since Helen. Tessa had taken over half the workshop. She'd started getting her own commissions, small ones at first from people in Greenville who didn't know her name or her record. A cutting board here, a step stool there. Then a restaurant owner in Jackson saw a table she'd built and ordered 6 more. She worked with a focus that bordered on fury, but it wasn't anger anymore. It was ambition. She'd also started reading. Not law books like Naomi, business books, marketing, accounting. She kept a notebook of numbers and plans she never showed anyone, but Gerald saw it once on the kitchen counter. The margins were full of calculations. "I want to apply to law school," she told Gerald one evening. He looked up from his coffee. Law school? Not to be a lawyer like Naomi wants. I want to understand contracts, business law. I want to build things and make sure nobody can take them from me. Gerald nodded. Then do it. It's expensive. We'll figure it out. They did. A scholarship for formerly incarcerated students, a work-study program, a professor in Jackson who read Tessa's application essay about a girl who threw a glass at a wall and learned to build a door instead, and called her personally. Naomi had earned her GED, then an associate degree, then a transfer acceptance to a university 3 states away. Pre-med, full scholarship. She'd written 17 scholarship essays in 6 months. Each one was better than the last. Each one she'd slid across the kitchen table for Gerald to read, and each time he'd nodded and said, "Send it." Her bad leg still ached on cold mornings. She still limped, but she'd stopped apologizing for it. Lily was the surprise nobody saw coming. A professor at the community college art program had seen one of her drawings. Gerald had framed 3 of them and hung them in the Greenville hardware store, the only place that still gave him business. The professor asked to see more. Lily brought her sketchbook, 47 pages of buildings, houses, schools, libraries, hospitals, all drawn in precise architectural detail. The professor sat quietly for a long time. Then she said, "These aren't drawings, these are blueprints." Lily was accepted into an architecture program in Chicago. She still hadn't spoken a full sentence, but her application portfolio spoke volumes. The day they left was in September. Warm, the kind of day where the light turns gold by 4 o'clock. Naomi hugged Gerald first, firm, steady. "I'll call every Sunday," she said. "You better." Tessa hugged him next, harder, longer. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Then Lily. She stood in front of Gerald for a moment. She reached into her bag and pulled out a drawing, the last one she'd done in his house. It was Gerald, sitting on the porch, coffee in hand, smiling. She pressed it into his palm. Then she leaned in close and whispered, so quiet he almost missed it, the first full sentence she'd spoken in 13 years. "Thank you, Dad." Gerald's hand closed around the drawing. He watched them load into the car Patricia Simmons had arranged. He stood on the porch until the taillights disappeared past the church on 2nd Avenue. Then he went inside. The house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that weighs something. He pinned Lily's drawing to the refrigerator next to all the others. Then he sat down and let the quiet settle. The first week was the hardest. The house felt too big and too empty at the same time. Every creak sounded like a footstep. Every silence felt like a question he couldn't answer. He caught himself making 4 cups of coffee one morning, stood there looking at the extra mugs for a full minute before he poured them out. But he kept Lily's drawings on the refrigerator. He kept Tessa's workbench exactly the way she'd left it. Tools hung in order, sawdust swept into the corners, a half-finished jewelry box sitting on the edge. He kept Naomi's highlighted law book stacked on the shelf in the hallway. He kept everything, because keeping it meant it was real, that it had happened, that 3 women had walked into his house broken and walked out whole. And that was enough to fill a house, even when the house was empty. 20 years is a long time to be right and have nobody notice. Gerald turned 70 the way he'd turned 60 and 55, alone, in the same house, with the same coffee, at the same table. The porch still sagged. The workshop still ran, though slower now. Arthritis had curled his fingers just enough that dovetail joints took twice as long. He still got orders. Not many. Enough. People from Greenville, mostly. They found him by word of mouth. Someone who knew someone who'd bought a bookshelf that was still standing 20 years later. Gerald's furniture outlasted most marriages in the county. Carver had changed in small, forgettable ways. The cotton gin was gone. A dollar store replaced the 5 and dime. Edna Finch had retired. Her daughter ran the post office now and didn't know Gerald's name. Brenda Caldwell was still Brenda Caldwell. Chair of the town council, officially now with a nameplate. She'd added a gazebo to the square, organized a heritage festival. Her name was on everything. She ran Carver the way she always had, with a firm hand and a short memory for things she'd rather forget. She and Gerald hadn't spoken in 19 years. They passed each other at the hardware store sometimes. She looked through him. He let her. The girls called. Not every Sunday like Naomi had promised. Life got in the way, but often enough. Gerald kept the calls short. He'd ask if they were eating, if they were sleeping, if they needed anything. They always said no. He always asked anyway. He followed their lives from a distance. He didn't understand half of what Naomi described about neurosurgery. He couldn't picture Tessa's courtrooms. He'd never been to Chicago, where Lily was designing buildings he'd only seen in photographs she mailed home. But he kept everything. Every photograph, every letter, every clipping. A shoebox under his bed, then 2 shoeboxes, then a whole drawer. He didn't display them. He didn't need to. He just needed to know they were there. Nobody in Carver asked about the girls. The town had done what towns do with uncomfortable memories, decided the whole thing hadn't happened. Gerald took in some girls. The girls left. End of story. No lesson, no reckoning. Gerald didn't hold grudges, but he remembered every signature on that petition, every canceled order, every Sunday in an empty pew, the rock through the window, the paint on the wall, the word fool in Brenda Caldwell's mouth. He remembered. He just didn't let it eat him. Sometimes on bad days, the days when his hands ached too much to hold a chisel, when the porch felt too wide and the kitchen too quiet, he'd open the drawer, pull out a photograph. Naomi in a white coat, standing in front of a hospital. Tessa in a courtroom, mid-argument, one hand raised. Lily in front of a building she'd designed, squinting into the Chicago sun. He'd look at them. Not for long, just long enough to remember that the hardest thing he ever did was also the only thing that mattered. Then he'd close the drawer and go back to work. One Tuesday afternoon in October, he walked to the mailbox. Electric bill, furniture catalog, and a large, flat envelope with no return address. He opened it at the kitchen table. Inside, architectural blueprints, professional grade, crisp lines, precise measurements. The header read, Owens Community Center, Carver, Mississippi. Beneath the blueprints, a handwritten note on plain white paper. 3 sentences, 3 different handwritings. Coming home, Dad. All 3 of us. This time, we're staying. Gerald set the note down. He looked at the blueprints, then at the drawings still pinned to his refrigerator, yellowed now, curling at the edges, but still there. Every single one. He picked up the phone and called Patricia Simmons. She'd retired 8 years ago, but she always picked up for Gerald. Patricia, they're coming home. Quiet for a moment. Then she laughed, the kind of laugh that has tears right behind it. About damn time, she said. 3 black SUVs rolled down Main Street on a Tuesday morning in October. The same street, the same time of year, but nothing else was the same. Edna Finch's daughter saw them first. She leaned over the counter the exact way her mother used to. Who on earth? The SUVs pulled into the town hall parking lot in a single line. Engines cut at the same time. Doors opened. The first woman out walked with a slight limp. You wouldn't notice unless you were looking. Charcoal suit, hospital badge clipped to her lapel. The kind of calm that comes from years of holding a scalpel over someone's open skull. Naomi Owens, MD, board-certified neurosurgeon. 14 published papers. Chief of neurosurgery at a teaching hospital in Atlanta. Featured in the National Medical Journal twice. The girl who'd been returned by 14 foster families had spent the last decade saving lives that other surgeons said couldn't be saved. The second woman buttoned her blazer like she was suiting up for war. Tessa Owens, J.D. civil rights attorney. 3 landmark cases argued before the state Supreme Court. All 3 won. She specialized in one thing, protecting children trapped in the foster care system. Every closing argument she gave carried the voice of a girl who'd once been told she was nothing but a convict with a record. The third woman said nothing. She carried a rolled blueprint under one arm and a leather portfolio under the other. Lily Owens, AIA, licensed architect, designer of the Westbrook Children's Hospital in Chicago, the one that won the National Architecture Award 2 years ago, the one a critic had called a building that heals before the medicine does. The girl who hadn't spoken for 13 years had learned to let her buildings speak instead. Gerald watched from his porch. Same coffee, Same man, just older, slower, a little more silver around the edges. He didn't walk over. He'd waited 20 years. He could wait 20 more minutes. The town hall meeting was scheduled for 10. By 9:45, every seat was taken. Word had traveled the way it always does in small towns, fast and slightly wrong. People thought it was a developer, a state project. Nobody expected 3 women they'd tried to forget. Brenda Caldwell sat at the center of the council table, nameplate in front of her, reading glasses on, pen ready. She looked up when the doors opened and saw Tessa walk in first. Her pen stopped moving. Naomi entered next. Lily followed. She unrolled her blueprint across the council table without asking permission. Tessa spoke first. Clear, controlled. Every word placed with the precision of a woman who had stood in front of judges and won. My name is Tessa Owens. This is Dr. Naomi Owens and Lily Owens. 20 years ago, we were taken in by Gerald Owens of 114 Maple Street. Some of you remember. Most of you would rather not. The room was very still. We're here to present a proposal. The Owens Community Center, a facility dedicated to young people aging out of the foster care system. Housing, job training, legal aid, medical services, and mental health support. Designed by Lily, legally structured by me. Medical program funded and directed by Naomi. She set a folder in front of Brenda. Total investment, $4.2 million. Privately funded. Every cent from the 3 of us. Brenda opened the folder. Her face didn't change, but her hand trembled, the same way Gerald's had trembled on the porch 20 years ago. We're not asking for approval, Tessa continued. The land is already purchased. The permits are filed with the county. We're here as a courtesy, to inform the council of what's coming. She paused, looked directly at Brenda. 20 years ago, you stood on our father's porch and called him a fool for taking us in. You called us broken beyond repair. You filed a complaint to have us removed. You organized a petition. 43 signatures. You got his clients to abandon him. You got his church to turn its back. Tessa's voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. It stayed level, the way a blade stays level. We didn't come back to settle a score, Mrs. Caldwell. We came back to build something in the town that gave us nothing, so that the next person thrown away by the system has a door to walk through. Because that's what our father taught us. You don't answer cruelty with cruelty. You answer it with a door. She stepped back. Lily unrolled the full blueprint across the table. The building was beautiful, open, light-filled, a ramp at every entrance, windows everywhere, a central courtyard with a garden, and above the main entrance, etched in the architectural rendering in clean, permanent letters, the Gerald Owens Center. Because somebody should. That quote. Gerald's words from 20 years ago. The ones he'd said in a county office to a social worker who'd asked him why. Brenda Caldwell stared at the blueprint. She opened her mouth, then she closed it. For the first time in her life, Brenda Caldwell had nothing to say. The room was silent. Not the awkward silence of discomfort, the heavy silence of people realizing, all at once, that they had been wrong. About Gerald, about those girls, about everything. And from the back of the room, someone started clapping. Then another, then another. Dale Perkins was in the 3rd row. The man who'd canceled a dining table 20 years ago because he didn't want to be associated. He clapped, slowly at first, then harder. Tom Bridwell was near the back, the man whose voicemail had been 1 sentence long. He stood up. Deacon Harris was by the window, the man who'd looked right through Gerald at church. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and didn't care who saw. One by one, the people who had signed Brenda Caldwell's petition, name number 3, name number 15, name number 31, rose to their feet. Not because they deserved to, but because they finally understood what they'd almost destroyed. Brenda stayed seated, alone, her nameplate in front of her, her hands flat on the table, her mouth closed. Gerald wasn't there. He was on his porch, 3 blocks away, coffee in hand. But he heard it. The whole town heard it. Carver, Mississippi was finally listening. The Owens Community Center opened on a Saturday in March. Clear sky, warm for the season. The kind of day Helen would have loved. Gerald stood at the front entrance in his only suit. the one he'd bought for Helen's funeral and hadn't worn since. It still fit, barely. Naomi was inside, setting up the medical clinic. Tessa was in the legal aid office organizing case files. Lily stood beside Gerald, watching children from the neighborhood run through the courtyard she'd designed. The one with the garden, the open windows, the ramps at every door. The first young woman to walk through the front entrance was 19. Aged out of foster care 3 days ago, she had a garbage bag of clothes and nowhere to sleep. Lily met her at the door. She didn't say much, she never did. But she took the girl's bag, walked her inside, and showed her a room with a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out onto the garden. The girl looked around the room. Then she looked at Lily. "Is this real?" Lily nodded. Gerald watched from the hallway. He leaned against the wall and said, "To no one, to everyone, to Helen, I didn't save them. They saved me." Outside, Tessa was shaking hands with a contractor. Naomi was on the phone with a medical supplier. And Lily was kneeling beside a 7-year-old boy, showing him how to hold a pencil the right way. The way Gerald had once shown her, without words, without pressure, just by being there. The door was open. It had always been open. That was the whole point.